Hello, everyone. Here we are again. I don't know about you, but I do not at all believe that it should be time for us to be doing another video chat like this again. It doesn't seem at all like we should be about a week away from our sixth weekend together for the year. I'm in the middle of getting ready for a Year of Mercy retreat that I'm doing out in Yorkton just this weekend. So we're going to jump right in, get right to it, and see what's coming up for our weekend just a week from now. Year ones. Saturday morning and afternoon, you're going to be spending the whole day with Jennifer Thompson looking at the Pentateuch. The Pentateuch, for those of you who've never heard that word before, that's referring to the first 5 books of the Bible: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. That she's going to be outlining the key components of salvation history. Those 5 books really set the stage for us with regards to our story of faith. For the whole rest of the scriptures. They cover God's creation of all things, his special creation of humanity in the image and likeness of God, the fall of humanity, God's promise of redemption that you'll find in Genesis 3:15, and the working out of that promise through people like Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the special election of Israel as the people of God who will serve to be his instrument of salvation for the whole world. That's all covered in just those first 5 books. Now, if you've been keeping up on your reading plan that we gave you at the beginning of the year, you'll have made it through the core of that, especially Genesis, Exodus, and Numbers. Already. So you'll have a sense already of the narrative within there. And then Jennifer is just going to take you in deeper to see about how those books are put together and how they communicate the truths of our faith, both the truth of the faith of Israel and the truth of our faith that built off of the revelation of God to Israel. So it's going to be a really fun day for all of you. I've had a chance to speak with Jennifer about this a number of times over the last little while. She's really excited to come out and share this with you. The Pentateuch is really one of her passions, and she loves coming out and visiting with you guys at the best of times. So that's Saturday morning and afternoon for you year ones. Now, year 2, Saturday morning, you're going to be with my really good friend Mary Deutscher, who's coming to visit us for the weekend. She's currently engaged in PhD work up in Saskatoon. She's quite well known for her work in bioethics and medical ethics, both in the province and around the country, which is really, really good because that's exactly the topic that I've got her coming out addressing with you that weekend. So come ready with all of your medical and ethical questions. You can maybe even try playing Stump the Expert with her. I'm sure she'll get a real kick out of that. Don't tell her that I told you to do that, though. All right. So year 3, Saturday morning, you're going to be spending the morning with Sister Bernadette Feist and a number of her friends coming out to speak with you about Native ministry. This is an area of ministry in our diocese that's always in really great need of enthusiastic and faith-filled help. This would be a key area for you to discern about as you look ahead to where God may be calling you to follow after this program is done. In the afternoons, year 2 and 3, year ones, you already know you're going to be spending the afternoon with Jennifer Thompson. Year 2 and 3, you're in for a really great treat because you get to spend the afternoon with me and all of my brother deacons and another really good friend of mine, Leah Perot. She's formerly the director of pastoral services in Saskatoon for the Diocese of Saskatoon. She's working now in healthcare governance, still up in Saskatoon. I had the great pleasure of working with Leah for a couple of years at Christ the King Parish, where she served as our youth minister. So Melissa and I had a chance to get her to know her really well. She got to know our kids really well. I'm really excited for her to come down and just to touch base with her again. It's always a fun time to get together with friends and be able to touch base and catch up. She is perhaps the biggest expert that we have in the province. And as Brett and I were talking about earlier this month, she is probably the biggest expert in the country, really, in the area of John Paul II's theology of the body. And this is going to be this is the topic that she's going to be addressing with us on Saturday afternoon with all of us. And it's going to be a really great lead in to the Christopher West Core Seminar on this very topic, the theology of the body, that's coming up at Holy Trinity Parish in Regina on April 29th and 30th. So I'm really looking forward to learning more about the theology of the body, something that I myself haven't spent a lot of time studying, learning it with you right alongside you. It's going to be a great way to spend the afternoon. For all of you, all the years and 1, 2s, and 3s, Saturday night, we're going to be taking some time to get ready for our end of the year wind ups for that last meeting of our year in June. As well as the year 3 commissioning. So we'll be breaking into some different groups and talking about the things that we need to get in place so that both of those events, our final meeting of the year and the commissioning for you year 3 candidates, can go really smoothly for us. So we're going to make sure all those plans are in place. Sunday morning, all of you, year 1, 2, and 3, are going to be spending the morning with Deacon Barry Wood. He's going to be with you in the chapel, giving you a practical and theological walk through the various parts of the Mass. So if you have any questions at all about the Mass in general or about serving at Mass in particular, Barry's going to be there to help you out. That's exactly what he's going to be there for. All right, that gives you a breakdown of what we've got looking forward as far as events-wise and class-wise for our weekend coming up. Now we're going to get into another section looking at the Year of Mercy. Over the last few months, we've been talking in these little video chats about different aspects of the Year of Mercy, most particularly zeroing in on the different corporal and spiritual works of mercy that serve as guidelines for us in being the face of mercy out in the world. So far, we've looked at giving drink to the thirsty, clothing the naked, counseling the doubtful, and instructing the ignorant. This month, we're going to look at a few of them kind of clustered together because there's some relationships among some of them. We're going to be looking at visiting the sick and imprisoned and comforting the afflicted, as well as forgiving offenses and bearing wrongs patiently. All right, so those are the ones we're going to look at. We're going to start with looking at visiting the sick and imprisoned and comforting the afflicted. The first two, visiting the sick and the imprisoned, those are corporal works of mercy. Corporal works, remember, those are those concrete physical actions that we can do that reveal mercy in the world. And so those first two, visiting the sick and the imprisoned, are corporal works of mercy. Comforting the afflicted is categorized under the spiritual work of mercy because it speaks more to that spiritual and emotional comfort that we can offer those in the world who are in need of that. But all three of them, really, in my mind, are all about making very concrete those relational connections between persons, most particularly those persons who experience disconnection from others. In some of those most profound ways, in sickness, in being imprisoned, and just feeling cut off emotionally and spiritually from others. All three of those speak to that. They really speak to our collective human need to be in relationship with other people, to be in relationships with others. Now, 2 weeks ago, this particular face of mercy showed up in my Facebook feed. It's the story of a chance meeting on a commuter train, and I think it demonstrates exactly what we're talking about with these three works of mercy. A particular passenger on a commuter train just shared this short little incident that they were a witness to on the train. It started off quite tense, but it ended up being quite revealing and really quite revealing for myself as well as they shared this. They tell the story of a 6'5" kind of large, burly guy who seemed to be very apparently suffering from drug influence or alcohol influence, maybe even some mental health issues, acting very aggressively on the bus. Erratic movements, cursing and shouting. Any of us who've used public transport at all have probably come across those situations where we've encountered individuals behaving exactly in those ways. And you know how off-putting it can be. Our initial reaction is to hold off, to back off. We act towards looking after our own selves, which is not entirely a bad thing. God does invite us to be prudent with how we serve Him and serve others. And yet, in this situation, this particular passenger relayed that while everyone else in the train car was scared, this one 70-year-old woman approached him. In the midst of his erratic movements, his cursing, his shouting, his screaming, she walked up to him. She reached out her hand and just tightly grasped hold of his hand. And she held his hand, just looking at him, until gradually he calmed down and sat down in silence with tears in his eyes. This particular witness spoke to the woman afterwards, and she said quite simply, "I'm a mother. I could tell he needed someone to touch." And she herself started to cry. The mercy in the world is about far more than simply changing one moment. This one act of mercy that she shared on that train sent ripples through everyone in that train. It certainly changed that man's moment, but she enabled the mercy of Christ to break into the world in a real and concrete way, reaching out and touching, calming and soothing. This is a man who was imprisoned in we don't know which way. Imprisoned with illness, imprisoned in his own mind, imprisoned with addiction. Maybe imprisoned just with anger and rage and hurt and pain. These three corporal and spiritual works of mercy, visiting the sick, visiting the imprisoned, comforting the afflicted, they all call us to bridge that distance that often forms even in spite of ourselves. And I thought it was just a beautiful story to share, kind of underlining that call that we might have. And these works of mercy, this whole year of mercy, is all about getting our radar tuned up to be aware of those times and places when God is calling us to act, to make His merciful love known in real, physical, concrete ways. The next ones that I wanted to look at was forgiveness. This whole idea of forgiveness and bearing wrongs, these spiritual works that call us to forgive as we've been forgiven. They bring up an essential characteristic of mercy that we've touched on before. We who are called to be the face of Christ's mercy in the world, we have to first be open to receiving that mercy ourselves. Being open to knowing it and acknowledging it. In order to be forgiving people, we have to open ourselves to recognize and to experience our own deep need for forgiveness. And whenever I think of this, there's one story in my own life that always comes to mind. It's two stories that kind of go hand in hand together. And it involves myself and my brother. It starts off myself and my brother, we were 10 years old, sitting in our backyard on a hot summer day. And in the middle of summer holidays, when you're 10 years old, it seems like summer is going to go on forever and ever. And it's easy for a 10-year-old boy and his brother to get pretty bored. Now, the most dangerous thing in the world, of course, is a couple of bored little boys. And my brother and myself were looking around trying to figure out what we're going to do with our day. And it just so happened that a few weeks before that, my dad, for whatever reason, and I've never really asked him why, but for whatever reason had acquired this old broken down car. I think it was an old blue Ford hardtop. I think it was missing a couple of tires. It was rusted through the doors. Most of the windows and stuff were smashed. So I don't know why he brought this and parked it in the backyard and what his plans were with it. But I do remember one thing. I remember seeing the gorgeous windshield on this car completely without a crack, without a blemish on it at all. And I remember it still had the "for sale" written in the window, the big O from the "for" almost seemed like a bullseye in the middle of the windshield. And so my brother and I got it in our heads that we would try to hit that bullseye with some rocks. And so we got up a nice pile of stones, and I let my little brother go first because I'm a really nice big brother. You could ask him. And I let him wind up and pitch it towards the car. And honestly, I think for the most part, he didn't even get close to the car at all. And so it was Big Brother's turn to kind of go up and show him how it's done. And I remember getting a nice, good, hefty rock and just getting up in front of that car like a pitcher just on the World Series and winding up as hard as good as I could, winding up and throwing that rock as hard as I could at that car window, just hoping beyond hope to hear that smash. Right? To hear that smash. There is no greater sound in the world to a 10-year-old boy on a summer afternoon than the smashing of glass, right? From a rock that he's thrown. Well, I got what I wanted, but not quite in the way that I expected. See, that rock arced through the air, hit the windshield of the car, and by some mystery of physics, ricocheted off and went right through my own bedroom window. Right through. My brother and I were stunned. We just stood there with our jaws dropped to the ground. And from inside, through the smashed glass, I could hear my mom inside going, "What?" And she comes running out. And by that point, we had zipped from behind the house to beside the house where she came out of the door. And she's asking us, "What's going on? What was that sound? What was that sound?" Well, we didn't want to get in trouble. So we did the only thing that two little boys do most naturally in a situation like that. We came up with a lie really fast. We told her, Mom, the neighbor's kids, they were making fun of us and laughing at us, and they threw a rock and it went right through my bedroom window." Now, we thought up this lie quick. We didn't really think it through very clearly because the next thing that my mom did was march next door to talk to the neighbors. Right next door, we stood on the doorstep, my brother and I, and we were shaking. We were shaking. We knew we were busted. Well, she pounded on the door, and she pounded on the door, and nobody answered. But we knew that at some point they were going to come home. And by the time she got back, we just lost it. We both burst into tears and we fessed up, just sobbing and sobbing. And she said those words that we dreaded to hear and that most little boys dread to hear. She said, "Go to your room and you wait till your dad gets home." You wait till your dad gets home. Now, this was pretty early in the day. I waited in my room for my dad to come home all day long. And I heard him pull up in the driveway. I remember hearing their muffled voices talking as he came in. And I remember hearing his footsteps coming down the hall. And you know that scene, if you've ever seen that Alfred Hitchcock movie Vertigo with Jimmy Stewart, and he's stuck with a broken leg in his room, and his evil neighbor's coming up the stairs. You can just see his shadow looming up the stairs. That's exactly how I felt. Every time I watch that movie, it reminds me of this moment when I hear my dad walking up the hallway towards my room. I remember seeing the doorknob starting to turn, and I'm sitting on my bed, and I'm just shaking, and I'm just shaking, and there's tears coming down my eyes already. I know I'm probably not going to live to see the morning at all. The door opens up, and he steps into my room. And from 10 years old, my dad looked like a giant in front of me. And the sun was already going down. It was already getting late. And he looked over to the broken glass, and the rock was still on my bedroom floor. If you would dare to touch it. And he looked there, and he looked to me, and he saw the tears in my eyes. And he said, "You've been here a long time, haven't you?" I said, Yeah, I have. And he said, "I think that's about enough." And he gave me a hug. I was not expecting that at all. But it stuck with me. It stuck with me, and thank God, because probably about 13 years later, I'm coming home from work one afternoon, and I walk in through the back door, And there in the middle of the kitchen is my wonderful little boy. He's about 4 years old at the time. And he's playing with his toys, but there's something weird about the floor. You know when you walk into a situation and you realize there's something not right here, but right for the first few minutes your brain can't connect what it is that's wrong here. There's like a lake in the middle of the floor. And I'm trying to figure out what this lake is, and he's pushing little boats around in it and stuff. And I look over behind him and I could see a 4 liter jug of vegetable oil tipped over and empty on its side. And it just struck me in that moment what exactly I am seeing here. And I'm looking off in the other direction, and here he had been flip flopping with his stocking feet through this lake of vegetable oil, up and down the stairs through the whole house, getting more toys and trucks and cars to play with in this puddle. And just the scope of the disaster just came crashing down on me. And I took a sharp breath that caught his attention. He stood up in shock right away, and he could see me, like, just standing there, I'm sure just with his shock reverberating through my body. And I looked at him and I just said, Braden, you need to go to your room right now. Now, that survival mode that kicks in with kids is brilliant, because he knew right then not to say another word, not to do another thing. He literally just dropped his toys and, in complete silence, went upstairs to his room. It took Melissa and I, we were lucky. We were lucky in that the place we were living in had no carpets through the whole place. It was all tile and wood floors. But it took us a good 5 hours, probably washing that floor with hot soapy water and a mop about 4 or 5 times before it didn't feel as though we were about to go flying over backwards every time we took a step. So my 4-year-old little guy is sitting in his room for 4 or 5 hours by himself. Well, we were probably not in the most amiable manner cleaning up and mopping up this mess over and over and over again. It was unbelievable. And then came the time to go and see him in his room. And I wasn't conscious of it during this whole event. But there came a moment when I was walking down the hallway to his room, and I could see his door at the end of the hallway, when this moment of my own incident of sitting in that bedroom waiting for my dad flashed into my head. Only suddenly I'm seeing this from my dad's perspective now. From my dad's perspective, walking up the hallway. And I'm watching my own hand reach out, and I'm thinking about him on the other side of the door as he's watching that doorknob slowly turn. And I remembered the anxiety, the fear, the terror, the tears that were in my own eyes. And I walked into his room, and I stood over him. I'm sure I looked like a giant of a man standing over him. And he looked up to my eyes, and he had tears in his eyes. And I said, Braden, you've been here for a long time, haven't you? He said, yeah. And I found myself speaking those same words to my son that my dad had spoken to me all those years ago. I think that's about enough. And I reached out and I held my little boy in my arms. And to this day, I never ever forget that cycle of mercy that God revealed to me in my life. What a graced moment. I always look back on that as a graced moment where God helped me to understand the great need to be aware and to always remember our stories of mercy so that we can always be ready to be merciful, to forgive, to bear wrongs done to us patiently, because our God bears us patiently. This just sums up the whole central thesis of Pope Francis's Jubilee of Mercy. We who are called to be the face of Christ's mercy, called to gush forth, as he says, in mercy to others. We can't do it unless we first experience that mercy ourselves. There aren't any shortcuts. And if we're honest with ourselves, we need to be reminded of our own encounters with mercy over and over and over again. And so don't be afraid to go back to those moments. They're gifted moments. They're graced moments. They are the tools that God has given you that will enable and empower you to share His mercy in the world. So in this year of mercy, and perhaps even today, I'd invite you to take some time to recall your own moments of mercy, those times when you have experienced God's mercy in your own life, concretely through others. And then look around and examine your life and your relationships. Ask God to show you. Maybe He doesn't need to show you very hard, because these people stand out in our minds. Those people in our lives who need to receive from us that same level of mercy, that need us to bear patiently the wrongs that we have had committed against us. Amen. Amen. Very much looking forward to getting together with you guys next weekend. Pray for me. Pray for all of our participants at my Year of Mercy retreat in Yorkton this Saturday. If you've got some spare time and want to join us at St. Gerard's Parish on Saturday from 10 until 3 in the afternoon, I'd love for you to come out. You hear a couple of these stories through the course of the retreat, but you'll hear some new ones and that as well. And even if you can't, having you spend that time to pray for us would just be marvelous. It would be marvelous. I would love to go to St. Gerard's on Saturday and just let them know they've got an army of people in our formation program praying for them as they encounter and enter into this year of mercy on retreat this coming weekend. So have yourselves a wonderful day. Continue to pray for me always, both in my ministry to you in this lay formation program, in my formation for the diaconate. There's not a day that goes by that I do not remember each and every one of you in prayer. Goodbye, peace to you, and God bless.